Okay, so for lesson 18, you can see that we're going to be working with the distributive property again. We've used this property quite a few times in this module, but it says we're going to decompose units. So that word decompose means break apart like we've been doing, and it says units, so we're going to be working with the unit form instead of like the actual number form, and you'll see what I'm talking about in just a second. Okay, so we've got this array, and this shows me 7 times 3, okay, because I've got 7 rows and I've got 3 in each row. As you can see, the dotted line shows a way that we're going to break apart the array. So now we've got 7 threes because we've got 7 rows of 3. So we're going to have to see how many 3s is this array broken into. So instead of over here writing 5 times 3 this time, we're going to write it a little bit different, and we're going to be using the word form. So if I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows with 3 in each row, then I'm going to call this 5 threes, which is the same thing as 5 times 3. It's just writing it different. And then down here I've got 2 rows of 3, so I'm going to call this 2 threes. Okay, so that's what this looks like. Now we're going to draw a number bond that kind of goes with this, and this is the part that you will be putting on your paper. So on your paper, you don't have to draw the array, but I do want you to take 7 times 3 like I have right here and write that on your paper. And then I want you to draw the number bond that looks like this, where we've got 7 threes total, and we broke it apart into 5 threes and 2 threes. So we're still using that 5 strategy like we have been using. Okay, so now once you have that drawn, we're going to kind of go back to what we did before. So underneath where you see 5 threes and then where you see 2 threes, we're just going to write the equations that we're going to use to add these two parts together to figure out what 7 times 3 actually was. So underneath them, you're going to put 5 times 3 is equal to 15, because we know 5 threes is 15. You don't really have to write the word and then underneath 2 times 3, you're going to put 2 times 3 is equal to 6. So it's just the same steps that we have done with the distributive property. It's just using the unit form, which is 7 threes, 5 threes, and 2 threes, and then we'll go ahead and write the equations that go with that. So now that we have 5 times 3 is 15, and we have 2 times 3 is 6, then out here beside our number bond, we can put 15 plus 6, and then we can add that together to figure out what 7 times 3 actually is. So when we add 15 plus 6, we get 21. So up here where you wrote 7 times 3, we're just going to put that it is equal to 21. Okay, so now we're on our next problem. You don't have to draw the number, or you don't have to draw the array for this one. We're just going to take a look at it. So you can see that we have 9 times 4. So when it's asking how many 4s, we know that we're going to have 9 4s. So they drew this dotted line to break it apart, and you can see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 rows. So we're still using the 5s fact, and we're still going to be writing it in unit form. So since we have 5 rows with 4 in each row, then we know that we're going to have 5 4s. And then down here we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 rows of 4, so we know that we have 4 4s. And you can see that the 9 was broken apart into 5 and 4, because when you put 5 and 4 together, that's equal to 9. So now we're going to go and we're going to draw our number bond. So in your number bond, you're going to write it in unit form, just like what we were doing before. So we're going to start at the top circle with 9 4s, because that's what we started out with, and we're going to break it apart into where they showed the dotted line. So if this side was 5 4s, and then this part was 4 4s, then our number bond, that's what we're going to show. We're going to have one circle that shows 5 4s, and we're going to have one circle that shows 4 4s, and it looks just like this. So I want you to get that drawn on your paper. Now underneath it, just like what we did on the first one, I want you to write the equation for 5 4s and 4 4s, which we know is going to match the array, 5 times 4 and 4 times 4. And then I want you to solve those two equations so we know what numbers we're going to be adding together to solve 9 times 4. So write an equation underneath 5 4s, write an equation underneath 4 4s, and figure out what those two equations are equal to. And once you have that done, you can push play to check it. So you had 5 times 4 because that's what 5 fours is, and we know that that's equal to 20. And then 4 fours is the same thing as 4 times 4, and we know that 4 times 4 is equal to 16. So over here beside our number bond, now we can put 20 plus 16. And we know that whenever we add 20 plus 16, we're going to get 36. So that tells us that the answer to 9 times 4 is equal to 36. So make sure you have that written on your paper right there by your number bond. And we are finished with this problem now and breaking it apart. Okay, so now we're going to try one without an array and just with the problem. So first question it says is how many 4s do we have? So on your piece of paper I do want you to write 8 times 4, and then beside it we're going to put that we have 8 4s, because that's how many 4s that actually is. So we know that 8 times 4 is the same thing as 8 times 4. I'm going to move this up here. So the next question says, what are some ways we can break apart 8? Okay, so because that's what we've been working on, is we've been breaking apart the first number, and we've been using the 5's fact to help us break it apart. So let's go ahead and start our number bond. So let's start with our circle at the top, and we know that we always put our total at the top. And since we've been writing it in unit form, we're going to put that we had 8 4s. So that's going to go at the top of our number bond. And we're going to break 8 4s into 2 different equations. So we know that we're going to have 2 different parts to our number bond. So let's get that drawn. And now we just have to figure out what 2 equations are we going to be breaking 8 times 4 into. So we know that we're going to use the 5's fact. So what do we add to 5 to make 8? And I hope you're telling me that you do 5 and 3 to make 8. So that tells me that the 2 equations that we're going to be working on is 5 4s, because we still have to do it times 4, and we're going to be working on 3 4s. So that's going to go into our number bond. So now we broke 8 4s into 5 4s and 3 4s. So we're going to do the same steps that we were doing a while ago and just write the equation underneath of both parts of the number bond. So that way we can add them together and figure out what 8 times 4 actually is. So get your equations written underneath your number bond for 5 times 4 and 3 times 4. And then solve those, and whenever you're ready to check that, you can push play. Okay, so 5 4s is the same thing as 5 times 4, and we know 5 times 4 is 20. 3 4s was the same thing as 3 times 4, and we know that 3 times 4 is 12. So now all we have to do is 20 plus 12, and that gives us 32. So where you wrote 8 times 4, we're going to put that that is equal to 32. And we are now done with that problem. Okay, so now we're ready to move on to the problem set. So if you would take that out and get that in front of you so we can start working on that. Okay, so just like what we were doing, first one we see that we have 8 times 10. So we're going to be taking the first number that we see right here, which is the 8, and we're breaking that 8 apart using a 5's fact. So you can see in the number bond that they already have 8 10s, because that stands for 5 10s, and they're breaking apart the 8, and they already have 5 10s, so we know that we are already working with 5 times 10. So let's go ahead and write that on our paper right here. So if they broke apart 8 into 5 and another number, then we know that 5 and 3 are going to give us 8. So in this part of the number bond, we're going to be putting 3 10s, because that is what would add up to equal 8 10s. So if we've got 5 10s and then we've got 3 10s, right here we're going to be putting 3 times 10. And now we are ready to add these 2 equations together to find the answer to 8 times 10. So we know that 5 times 10 is 50, because when we're skip counting by 10s 5 times, you get 50. We know that 3 times 10 is 30, because when we're skip counting by 10s 3 times, we get 30. So now all we have to do is 50 plus 30. And I know that 5 plus 3 is 8, so I know that 50 plus 30 is going to give me 80. So now all I have to do is go up here and write 80, because I know now that 8 times 10 is 80. So it's very simple, just like what we did together on the concept development, just remembering the steps that you need to take. So let's go on to the second one. We've got 7 times 4, so I know that 7 times 4 is 7 fours. So I know that whatever I'm breaking it apart into, my 4s are going to stay the same. I'm just going to break apart the 7. So they've already broke apart the 7 into 5. So now you have to ask yourself, 5 and what number make 7? So I know that 5 plus 2 makes 7. And I know that I'm going to be working with 2 4s. So I'm going to be putting 2 4s into this part of the number bond. So now what I want you to do for the rest of number 2 is take the steps that we already know that we are taking, writing the multiplication equation underneath the part of the number bond, and then solving those multiplication equations, and then adding those two numbers together so we know what 7 times 4 is actually equal to. So go ahead and finish solving number 2, and whenever you have that done, you can push play to check it. Okay, so we know that 5 fours is the same thing as 5 times 4, and we know that 5 times 4 is equal to 20. We know that 2 fours is the same thing as 2 times 4, and we know that 2 times 4 is equal to 8. So when we add 20 and 8 together, we get 28. So up here beside 7 times 4, you should have wrote the number 28. Now we're ready to move on to the last two problems for the first page of the problem set, and it's going to be the exact same steps that we've been taking. And the only thing with this one is both of these are blank, but you know you have a 10 here, so you know that 5 and 5 make 10. So you know in both parts of this number bond you're going to have 5 10s and 5 10s. This one, the only thing that they're doing different here is they are not writing it where they have 7 4s and 5 4s. They're not writing it in unit form. They're already going ahead and just writing it using the equation. So that way we're going to skip a few steps that we were doing up at the top, and all we have to do is write the equation. So if this is 9 times 10, that's the whole problem that we're working with. They're breaking apart the 9, so we've got 5, and we're still multiplying that by 10. So now we just have to ask ourselves, 5 plus what number gives us 10? So when you start at 5 and you count on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Well, I said 5. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, I keep counting to 10. That's what I'm doing. Okay, 6, 7, 8, 9. I'm just counting to 9. So I just had to add 4 more to 5, and that would have given me 9. I keep messing up what I'm saying. So in this part of the number bond, we've got 4 times 10. And now all we have to do is underneath it write the answer to what those parts of the number bond stand for. So I know that I'm counting by 10s here, so I know that 5 times 10 is going to give me 50. I know that 4 times 10 is going to give me 40. So now all I have to do is go and add these together. So 50 plus 40 is going to be equal to 90, because I know that 5 plus 4 is equal to 9. I just have to add that 0 on. So up here where we have 9 times 10, we know that the answer is 90. And I'm hoping that you already knew that the answer to 9 times 10 is 90, because you just have to skip count by 10s 9 times. Whereas like over here, I'm hoping that you already know that the answer to 10 times 10 is, because you skip count by 10s 10 times, or you just ask yourself, how many is 10 10s? So now we just need to finish this part. If we have 10 times 10, we're going to break apart the 10, and if we're using a 5's fact, that's going to make it really easy, because we know that 5 and 5 make 10s. So now we've got 5 times 10 in this part, and then we're going to have the same thing over here, 5 times 10 in this part. So we're just using the same equation, because that's how we break it apart when we're working with 10. So we know that 5 times 10 is 50, and we know that 5 times 10 is 50. So now we have to do is just 50 plus 50. And hopefully you know that very quickly that it's equal to 100. So we know 10 times 10 is also equal to 100. Okay, on to the back side of the problem set. Number 5 says there are 7 teams in the soccer tournament. 10 children play on each team. How many children are playing in the tournament? Use the break apart and distribute strategy and draw a number bond to solve. Okay, we don't have to do that. Okay, because for 1, we see this number 10 here, and we know we're going to be skip counting by tens, and that's something that's very easy to do. We also see that this has 7 teams, so we know that we're going to have 7 groups. So what we're going to go ahead and do is we're going to draw 7 groups. Whoopsie. We're going to draw 7 groups, and we're just going to put the number 10 in here. I do not want you drawing 10 dots because we know how to skip count by tens very easily. There's no point in having to draw all those dots and take up a lot of time. So if we know we have 7 teams and there's going to be 10 children on each team, then all we have to do is draw 7 groups with 10 in each group. So why don't you push pause and get that drawn on your paper and push play whenever you're ready to move on. Okay, so we've got 7 groups to represent 7 teams, and we've got 10 in each group because there's 10 children on each team. So the only thing I really want you to do now is write the equation that goes with this problem, and then finish filling in this blank right here to tell how many children are playing in the tournament. So if you want to push pause and get that written on your paper, you can do that now. Okay, so we had 7 groups with 10 in each group, so that is 7 times 10, and we know that that's 70 because we're just skip counting by tens 7 times. And so in this blank, we know that there are 70 children playing in the tournament. Okay, moving on to number 6. It says, what is the total number of sides on 8 triangles? So what we're going to do is we're going to draw 8 triangles. We know that each triangle has 3 sides, so inside your triangle, you're just going to write the number 3. There's no point in putting 3 dots since you already know that there are 3 sides. So on your paper, draw your 8 triangles, putting 3 in each triangle. And then I want you to go ahead and write the equation that's going to match what you're working with. So that way we'll know how many sides are on 8 triangles. So you can push pause to get that done and push play whenever you're ready to check it. Okay, so you have 8 triangles drawn. You put 3 in each triangle, and if you were to count all of those 3's together, you would have gotten that it was 24. If you didn't write your sentence, you can go ahead and do that now. If it was asking the total number of sides on 8 triangles, so we're just putting there are 24 sides on 8 triangles. Okay, now we're ready to move on to the last one. It says there are 12 rows of bottled drinks in the vending machine. I want you to go ahead and take a look at this word right here. It says rows, so it's always going to be relating to an array since an array has rows in it. It says each row has 10 bottles. How many bottles are in the vending machine? So we know we're going to be working with 12 rows, and we know that there's going to be 10 in each row. So this is a pretty big array to draw, but that's okay. Just draw your dots. You got 12 rows with 10 in each row. And after you have that drawn, you're going to write the equation that goes with your array, and then you're going to write the sentence that answers the question of how many bottles are in the vending machine. Now, I don't want you to go and I don't want you to count every single dot. All you have to do is skip count by tens 12 times, and that's going to give you your answer. So please do not go and count all these dots, because anytime you're multiplying by 10, you're automatically thinking, I can skip count by tens to find my answer. So go ahead and work on number 7, and once you have that done, you can push play to check it. Man, that was a large array to draw. That took me a while. The only thing with arrays is you've got to try really hard to make it straight, and that can be hard sometimes. So you should have had 12 rows with 10 in each row. So the multiplication equation that would match that is 12 times 10. And if you counted by tens 12 times, you should have gotten 120. So the sentence I was looking for is there are 120 bottles in the vending machine. And now you are ready for the exit ticket. So it's going to be just like what we were working on with the number bond, and they already showed Dylan's work. I know that you don't see the actual equation up at the top, but you know that if we're doing 5 times 4 and 1 times 4, then you've got to ask yourself, what's that 5 and that 1 put together? Because then you'll know the actual equation that's going to go at the top of the number bond. So you're pretty much just going to finish filling out the number bond and writing in the equation and what it actually answers. So whenever you're done with that, you can bring it to me to check.